Returning Senator, Mr. Hello Pagkain. Number 51 in the ballot, Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. I am not the Philippine national anthem. Thank you very much for that kind introduction to my classmate, sometimes seatmate, but always the better law student. I was always absent. Louis Dasioche, past president. Of course, past district governors, Tony Quila, Sid Garcia, James Macasyar, Sue Santa Maria, Peps Benzon, and Chacha Camacho. Our district governor-elect, Reggie Nolino, Keith Harrison, our president, Eddie Galvez, president-elect. Si Eddie pala ang president-elect. Okay. Former President Caloy Ocampo, Javi Calleja, President nominee, Chris Ferreira, President nominee designate, Ferrareza, Chris Ferrareza, Aaron Mempin, our invocator, and to actually fellow Rotarians, because I was a Rotary Club member of New Manila East many years ago. But my father was an active, when he was still alive, Rotarian, president of the Rotary Club of Diliman. I see a number of women Rotarians. I understand it was my father who first admitted a woman Rotarian in the Rotary Club of Diliman. That was Niki Cosete. Yeah, I'm sure my father would be very happy looking down in heaven as I speak to you, Rotarians. Today is Feb 25, People Power anniversary from 39 years ago. Louis asked me to speak on people power and the 2025 national elections, which is 76 days from today. After 39 years since the peaceful popular uprising that toppled the Marcos dictatorship, where are we today? Based on scientific surveys on the current public pulse, it does not look very good. 63% of our citizens have rated themselves as poor. We have the lowest levels of optimism since 2009, 15 years ago. Our education system is in crisis. Our children, 0 to 7 years old, are experiencing, 1/3 of them are experiencing various degrees of stunting. The education performance or education indicators of the performance of our children leave very much to be desired. Inflation continues to plague the ordinary folk. Ang taas ng presyo ng bilihin is the number one or number two concern of the ordinary folk. Jobs and salary increases are also a number one concern of our ordinary folk. High prices of food, highest levels actually of animosity in the highest levels of politics and governance. Where is this disenchantment coming from? Where is the disappointment and the despair coming from? What has triggered the levels of suffering and despair? The 63% self-poverty rating is the lowest since 2004, or the highest rather, since 2004, and the level of hopelessness is the highest in 15 years, since about 2009. So what has triggered these levels of suffering and despair? I would say two things: the economy and the politics. Coming from the previous national elections where the promise was unity and the promise was 20 pesos a kilo of rice, we now face the opposite. A disunity that is unprecedented and rice prices that tripled rather than was met with 20% commitment. So both promises broken, and all of that, there is animosity, anger, there is mudslinging, throwing of mud, of corruption issues left and right, leaves our voters both having a sense of being betrayed and obviously suffering because of high prices of food. Everywhere you go, people will say and will agree that a few years ago, 1,000 pesos maraming nabibili. Today, they will say, halos wala na rin mabili ang 1,000 piso. There is a sense of foreboding, a brewing, simmering level of disenchantment and despair. And this going into the 2025 national elections. So People Power Day is today, celebrating 39 years. Clearly, the promise of People Power continues to evade us of a democracy, of a better life. If you would, some of you will remember, it wasn't so much the political slogans prior to People Power 1, but the economic slogans that really hit home, such as 40 pesos na ang isang kilong galunggong. Today, it's 300 pesos isang kilo ng galunggong. So clearly, the promises of EDSA, a lot have remained unfulfilled. And we, Filipinos, have been grappling with the challenge of genuine leadership in the public sector. Isang malaking hamon. Also, politically speaking, and in the context of the coming elections, in a recent scientific poll of Okta, 26% consider themselves as neither for or against any of the nag-uumbugang mga elepante ika nga. Neither DBM nor DBS. That's a 26%, none of the above. That is a big number. I remember in 2009, prior to the national elections and prior to the death of Cory, 29% of those polls said none of the above. But of course, that was a presidential election. 29% said none of the above in consideration or in the context of several presidential candidates. The front runner then was 33%. That was in June of 2009. That was Manny Villar. But I didn't see that as the front lead runner. I didn't see that as the news actually that I was looking at, or the interesting bit of information. It was actually the 29% who said none of the above. Because I said then, I remember that because I was still a candidate. I announced my candidacy for vice president then in 2009, and I was looking at the numbers. I said to myself, 29% none of the above. If we give TV ads to 29%, none of the above, none of the above will be the front runner. And then when Cory died in August, I told myself it will be Pinoy because the 29% finally will have that choice. That 29%, I believe, was a protest, growing, simmering despair and disenchantment sentiment that found its way
to a non-candidate. Pinoy did not intend to run. In fact, he first refused and said, wala namang iba. May konti akong side kwento doon because when he was interviewed after, he was asked, when was it that you felt the need to run, or at least that it entered your mind? And he said, it was when we were going to Manila Memorial, we were all in the coaster. He left the coaster in order to bury the procession, the burial procession of Cory. He left, went out of the coaster, and the people mobbed him. And the people said, ikaw na, kayo na ang tumakbo. And that was his answer to the interview when he felt that in fact we should consider running. Of course, the not so known story was that he actually left to look for the restroom because it was a long session. And as many of us know, we wanted to smoke a cigarette. So the joke there was, if there was a restroom inside the coaster, baka hindi siya presidente. And so the other joke is, be careful if you're headed for the restroom, you might end up becoming president. But seriously, there was a growing sense of despair then, just as we have a growing sense of disenchantment and despair today. Whether or not there will be a protest vote, whether or not there will be an outpouring of support and sympathy for a non-candidate or the none of the above candidate, we will see. All depends on how the elections play out, I'd like to think. Now, having said that, we are one of two candidates as a tandem, Bam Aquino and myself. Bam Aquino was the campaign manager of Lenny in 2016 and again in 2022. And I ran as Lenny's vice president in 2022. We both believe that what we sow in 2022, we have to nurture, and that a bountiful harvest sooner or later will happen. Just the other day, in Pampanga, after we went through a series of campaign sorties, a lady went up to me, choked in her, and teared up and cried, because she supported us in the last election. I've never seen that kind of investedness or in being invested in a campaign, in the national level, in my entire state, several states as a national candidate, a national political leader. And it has not the only time that it has happened. It has happened repeatedly over and over in the last 2 years. And therefore, Bam and I believe, we are, potentially, we are in an unprecedented situation where our supporters will come out. We hope to be able to inspire them and bring about people power. The 2022 elections, many may say, was an unprecedented outpouring of voluntarism. I said, I've never seen murals in my 3 runs as Senate. Murals of myself. Sabi ko nga, buhay pa naman ako, bakit marami na akong mural? But that was really the volunteers coming out in their vast numbers. And in Cebu, I remember saying, I've never also had billboards. Because if you don't have enough resources, you bring it to TV or radio expenses for ads, not on billboards. Billboards then was not effective as TV and radio. So I've never had billboards. So when I said, this is the first time I have a billboard in 2022, here in Cebu, the Cebu donor went up to me and said, well, Senator, this is also the first time we're donating to a politician a billboard. So it's par for the course. But going back, is there an opportunity for an uprising, electoral uprising? I believe so. Are our voters capable of making informed decisions despite what the polling suggests? I believe so. The ability to discern is necessary so that an informed decision becomes possible. Without discernment, there is no informed decision. And without conversation, there can be no discernment. What we've learned in the last elections is there was no clear conversation as amongst voters. In fact, what was prevailing was insults, threats, bullying. There's no conversation there. Clearly, there can be no conversation when insults are being traded. It's all hate, anger, animosity, polarization. And that's why the challenge today is how do we, in our campaign sorties, provide the setting within which there can be conversations, after which discernment can then follow, and an informed decision can be made. The reason I believe why precisely the polls are such is because we need to have those conversations so that discernment will take place and finally informed decisions are made. Are people capable of making informed decisions? I think yes, and I will cite the data. When I was running for the Senate in 2021, I had not planned on running for vice president. That was, if Lenny decided last minute, well, obviously, I decided last 10 seconds because after her decision, she came up to me and asked me. But as I was running for the Senate and had been preparing for the Senate run, in September of 2021, I was ranking 12 to 15. Risa Ontiveros was ranking 15 to 17. And Dick Gordon was ranking 15 to 21. So we were all pretty much outside the winning circle. After 45 days of hearings in the Parliament, controversy, where Dick, myself, and Risa played a very active role, by October 2021, I was ranking 9 to 12. Risa was ranking 12 to 15. And Dick was ranking 12 to 17. We gained about anywhere between 5 to 7 million votes. And the only major change in our connection with our voters was the family hearings, which is, in my analysis, once the voter is able to see for himself or herself, without the disinformation, unfiltered, the facts, voters are capable of making informed decisions. The challenge is, how do we address disinformation? How do we address the short memories? Because, after a while, people forget, precisely because the nature of social media is that there's so much clutter out there that maybe a month is like an eternity in terms of the information that one can access and be exposed to. So these are some of the challenges. I believe, in the context of where we're at today, they say, pagka kumakalam na ang sikmura, when the hunger pans, when the economy is already hurting, and the opportunity for protest, a protest vote is there. I will reiterate, there was a protest vote with Pinoy because of the disenchantment and disappointment as among the choices, which led to him being drafted without his consent. Well, of course with his consent, but he was, ang biro namin papito-pito lang doon sa kanto, pero talagang sabi ng mga kababayan natin, ikaw ang sumama, ikaw na, gusto namin presidente. Sige. Yeah. And even before that, in 2007, the run-up to 2010, two presidents, one after the other in a period of 4 years, betrayed the people. President Estrada in 2001 and President Arroyo with ZTE, Hello Garci in 2004. So much 2007, the despair was already there. The protest vote, I would like to think, well, two-pronged. There was an angry protest vote. This is my own analysis. You can disagree with me. And there was a hopeful protest vote. The angry protest vote was that in 2007, Sonny Trillanes, while in jail, won because he represented, a fighter who was unjustly detained, and therefore the anger, he was as angry as everyone else. Let's put it that way. Therefore, they shared with his anger and his crusade. The other was hope. Of course, I may be lifting my own bench here, bubuhat ng sariling bangko, because I ran an independent campaign in 2007. I refused to join Estrada. I refused to join Aquino. For the first time in the history of the Senate, an incumbent senator refused to join any of the tickets, opposition or administration, because I asked both of them to resign. I felt the betrayal of the public trust was such that if you call someone to resign and the politicians left without, walang isang salita, walang prinsipyo at pananindigan, I said, how can I explain to my kids? I asked Era to resign and now I'm joining his ticket and he's raising my hand. In the same way, how can I ask GMA how can I explain to my kids that I asked GMA to resign rather, and then I'm with her in the ticket because I had to win an election. So I chose the independent path. It made it more difficult because someone in the opposition, without my consent, asked me to join, told Estrada, or at least that's the story I was told, that I was going to join the opposition, which was not true. And so they announced that I was already with the opposition, and I said no. So I had to go up to them and say, I'm sorry, I'm not joining the opposition. Of course, that's very difficult because people would say, and they actually said it, it's political suicide what he's doing, etc., etc. Anyway, to make the long story short, after the elections, I was number one in Pampanga, I was number one in Cebu, I was number one in Iloilo, I was number one in Dumaguete, and I was number one in Osamis as an independent. So I ended up number 5, and I remember this up until today. When I ran that independent campaign, it was in Mabalacat, Pampanga, in a resettlement area. We were doing a independent motorcade. A voter in basketball shorts and basketball jersey, wearing slippers, came up to me while I was on the truck, pickup, got my hand and told me, "Sama mo ito, Kiko." And when I opened my palm, it was 100 pesos. May grasa pa. 100 pesos then would have bought you maybe 5 kilos of rice. But that voter decided to give it to me. And when, at that point, I said, pag tumaya na ang taong bayan, mananalo tayo. And true enough, we did win that one, number 1 in Pampanga. So there, are we in the cusp of another electoral upheaval in 2025 and a run-up to 2028? It all depends. I consider this, at least my running, together with Bam, after our defeats in 2016, I won then, but our president lost. 2019, 2022, I consider this run a sacred duty for the cause of good governance to deliver a victory for our people and our nation. And I hope that as we go through the next 77 days, our citizens will likewise embrace the burden, the responsibility, the sacred duty to win this for our people. Pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Maraming salamat.